These are the top builds in Diablo 4 Season 8 based on the following few reasons. I've played them all myself either during Season 7, the PTR, or this season, the pit leaderboard, or discussions with some of the best players in the game. But here's the kicker. Some of these builds are boring as shit or insanely difficult to pull off. So that's why I'm providing you with 2 builds per class. The best one, and one that is strong but also insanely fun to play and easy to make sure even the peanut brain dad gamers out there has a good build for the season. Now we're going to start this off strong with the Rogue. But first, I want to mention that we're also running a giveaway for the season. Pornstash and his dad over at the Crimson Market are giving away some crazy-ass PCs, and you can enter the draft for free using my link and the golden ticket. First, we have the Hibernator, and they're also rolling out crazy-ass PCs like this last epic one. I'm dumping the link in the description, but make sure to sign up now so you don't miss out. Alright, and for our first Rogue build, we have the strongest one, and that's by quite the margin, capable of pumping out trillions of DPS. And it's of course, Death Trap. It has previously been one of the best builds in the game for quite some time, but the skill is finally spammable. Funnily enough, it was also spammable during the PTR, and they nuked that interaction as they did not want ultimate skills being free to cast. But at the same time, they fixed the bugged Beastfall boots, and we're back to spamming it. So how does the build work, and why is it so strong? Well, the interactions here are rather beautiful. Death Trap, as you may know, is an ultimate skill. This means that the skill has a long-ass cooldown, but some strong damage aspects and base damage. But by utilizing the Scoundrel's leathers, we can slap the core skill tag on it, and with that, introduce a bunch of additional multipliers. But also, we're able to make use of the Beastfall boots. This makes your ultimate deal a shit ton of damage and spend all of your resources. And by spending a bunch of resources, we can reduce its cooldown via preparation. Lovely, huh? Indeed. Combine that with the Banished Lord's Talisman, and all of that spent energy can in turn be turned into overpowering every cast. And as you may be aware, overpower is crazy broken in this game. Now, to make all of these interactions work, you do need some decent gear, because you need a bunch of cooldown reduction to reduce the cooldown of Death Trap, and you need a bunch of resources to reduce the final seconds of cooldown and overpower. The build also relies completely on 2 uniques, and preferably more. There is, however, a few shortcuts you can make to get the build online quicker, and you'll find those in Sanctum's build guide. Because when you get to the point that Death Trap is spammable, then all you need to do is bash your head on the keyboard as hard as possible, and you'll delete screens, because every button that is not Death Trap is simply there to boost your damage or provide utility. To find all of these uniques, however, I recommend the most fun Rogue build of the season, which is of course Spin to Win, baby. Dance of Knives has never been stronger than now. Previously having to rely on like 20 fucking snapshots, the build is now incredibly chill, and all you need to do is hold down the Spin to Win button and you'll clear the entire screen. You can also use this build from level 1 to Torment 4, but after that, I recommend swapping to Death Trap for pushing and using the Armory when you want to Spin to Win and speed farm. Alright, enough fucking yapping. How does the build work? Well, that's rather simple. Blizz finally got the massive thumb out of their ass and fixed Shadow Clone, meaning we are using Shadow Clone to more than double our damage. And what did they fix exactly? Well, 2 things really. First, the Shadow Clone counts as a minion and benefits from most of our multipliers. And secondly, the imitated imbuement actually works, allowing the clone to use our imbuments. If you've played Rogue before, then you know how important this is for the build to deal damage. And when it comes to the playstyle, there are a bunch of different variants you can try. Personally, I'm using only 1 snapshot. I simply spin and win, followed by pressing the Shadow Clone button. This will in turn reset all of my other cooldowns, and I can do a quick snapshot of Shadow Imbuement and Concealment afterwards. This allows me to keep Shadow Imbuement and Concealment up at all times, which in turn also allows me to always crit and apply Vulnerable. But if you're lazy, you just go with a version that requires 0 brain power and have fun. Next up, we're checking out the Shit Smearer, aka the Barb, and I'm a bit conflicted which one of these two builds will be the ultimate winner, but I still believe in the Mighty Throw build. I played it on the PTR, and despite having absolute trash gear, it was still dealing some large stonks. This is mainly due to it receiving some humongous fucking buffs this season. For starters, we got the new pair of gloves. This grants us some big stonks every 12 seconds, which is great for one-tapping Uber bosses, but what is particularly strong here are the stats. Because with the new aspect of delayed extinction, we can now turn cooldown reduction into multiplicative damage on top of already receiving a humongous 6x multiplier from this aspect when it's imprinted on a two-hander. That's actually crazy. But Mr. Para Gaming Big Dick Senpai, won't this make the cooldown of Mighty Throw long as hell? Nah, my man or woman. We're of course still utilizing the third blade, reducing the cooldown down to 0. Now, to make this more difficult on your peanut brain, there are of course a bunch of different ways to play this build. But personally, I'm a fan of the bash variant showcased here, because all we do is bash, mighty throw, bash, mighty throw. This allows for easy gearing as bash provides fury and overpowers and a simple playstyle. The rest of the skills are then used for utility, having shouts for damage, damage reduction and movement speed, and an ultimate of your choosing for a buttload of additional damage. For the fun, and possibly the strongest build, we have the Earthquake Barb, and as this will be the fun build, we're focusing on the whirlwind version of Earthquakes, because holy shit, is this fun. You just spin and you win. And how does it work? Well shit, it relies entirely on the tech rune. This build was completely broken in Season 7, and on the PTR, but unfortunately it got its asshole turned inside out. But considering it came from being one of the best builds in the game, let's just say it's still pretty damn good. The tech rune in itself did get nerfed though, along with a bunch of earthquake modifiers, and yet it's already clearing above tier 100 in the pit. And other than the tech rune, is there anything you need to know to understand the build? Honestly man, barely. You use the tech rune and combine it with the back rune to spawn earthquakes. The tech rune is easy to find, but this asshole, not as much. But you can use any other rune to spawn tech if you can't find it early. The Whirlwind in itself is only used for utility. It allows you to move freely around the map, buffing you alongside, spawning a huge ass beam, granting you yet another damage multiplier from the boss powers. All the other skills on your bars are then simply used to buff you further and spawn some additional earthquakes. All in all, a simple, beautiful and insanely fun build that you can get online early and only get stronger from there. No uniques or brain for that matter needed. Next up, we are checking out the Sorcerer. This class has a few great builds and a bunch of decent builds that are fun to play. Overall, the build variety of this class is looking great if you're just looking to chill and farm T4 content. But for pushing, there's just one build for the moment, and that is Lightning Spear. The build functions as follows. You press Lightning Spear and you delete screens. Great, huh? Damn right. The reason this build is still insanely strong this season is due to the splintering energy aspect. What this does is that it provides an unlimited scaling of your lightning spears from critical strike damage. This obviously means that you want to get as much crit damage as humanly possible on your gear, and that in turn means that the build feels better the stronger gear you can find. The build also got a decent pit pushing buff this season via Greater Fireball. We're now able to execute all enemies except bosses when they are below 25% life. This will of course work on all sorcerer builds, but it's especially useful when pit pushing. Overall though, The build functions basically the same as previous seasons, where all the buttons on your bars are there for utility, apart from Lightning Spear and now Fireball, if you decide to use that, which I reckon a lot of players will. Alright, and onward we go to the fun build. And with fun, I truly mean fun. It's the Dino Destroyer Meteor build, and it's finally not only a fun build, but also one of the strongest sorcerer builds of the season. It spawns meteors all over the goddamn place. Dinosaurs in my socks hates it, if you know what I mean, but I love it, and that's for sure. So how does it work? Easy. The build got a shit ton of buffs not only this season, but also previous seasons, and we are in fact not focusing on the meteor in itself, but we are rather focusing on the meteorites that they spawn. And spawn we do via the Shattered Stars aspect. Now, why would we want to focus on these and not meteor in itself for damage? Well, meteorites has some humongous multipliers we can utilize. For example, the Armageddon aspect, providing a 5x multiplier or so for the meteorites. We then just need to spawn a shit ton of meteorites, and they'll burn enemies to the ground. The only item you'll need to make this build shine is the Starfall Coronet. It spawns a bunch of additional meteors, but puts the skill on a cooldown. And how do we solve the cooldown? We grab cooldown reduction, of course. This, in combination with the cooldown reduction we get from Ice Blades, is enough to reduce its cooldown back down to 0, allowing us to spam it again and repeat. When it comes to the other skills, they're used for defensives, damage, and mobility. The important one to know about here is Inferno, as it is required for the Armageddon build to function. But other than that, you just press all of the buttons and enjoy having the entire screen full of meteoras and meteorites. Next up on the list is the Emo. If you played Season 7, then you've definitely seen this build before. The Bloodwave build. This build got nuked in the Season 8 PTR, or well, it was still the best Necro build, and one of the best builds in the entire game. So naturally, Blizz had to buff it heading into Season 8. Good stuff. Anyways, if you haven't seen the build before, then this is how it functions. First, we have the new Kessime Pantaloonies from Season 7. Since Bloodwave has a long-ass cooldown, these pants offsets this via a shit ton of cooldown reduction, but they are also what makes these booty-clapping waves, spawning the blood waves from both sides and increasing their damage by crazy amounts. Combine this with the tidal wave aspect, and you've got yourself everything you need to deal trillions of damage. Now, this is not enough to reset the cooldown, though. To do this, we slap on the fast blood aspect, because it just so happens that blood waves spawn blood orbs, and by picking these things up, we can instantly reset the cooldown of our blood wave. And in the ultra endgame versions, we can even reduce the cooldown enough simply using Decrepify and a lot of lucky hit plus cooldown reduction. Everything that is then left to do is to stack a bunch of damage multipliers, and you're done to play the build. You only really need the aspects and the pantaloonies and you'll be online. But the more cooldown reduction you can stack, the easier it will be to reset the cooldown of Bloodwave. Now, what makes the build truly shine, though, is simple yet lovely, and that is Bloodwave being a, well, blood skill. Because it just so happens that the blood multipliers the Necro has access to are miles ahead of everything else. We're talking stacking 2x multiplier after 2x multiplier, and by combining this with Rathma's Vigor, we can not only stack these blood multipliers, but we can also overpower every cast. And again, overpowers in this game are extremely overtuned, so in short, the build is broken due to 2 reasons. 1, disgusting damage bonuses, and 2, being able to utilize every broken multiplier from the skill tree and paragons. And funnily enough, this is exactly what our second build does as well, the Blood Spear build. This build is not far off from the Bloodwave build in terms of damage, but when it comes to the fun factor, then this build is in my opinion far ahead. I absolutely love this build. Having it, as one of my favorite builds in the game for sure. And why is it fun? Just look at this shit. How can you not find this enjoyable? Now we already talked about some of the things making the Bloodwave build broken, and we're utilizing the same techs for this build. That is, overpowers and blood skill multipliers. To do this, we're using the Indira's memory pantaloonies to turn our boner spear into a bloody boner spear. Gross, but lovely. We're not going to use Bloodwave in this build to spawn boner prisons, though, that we do ourselves, because we'll indeed have to spam out boner prisons if we want to overpower, which is due to the boner duster's aspect. Utilizing this, we can overpower each cast as long as enemies are stuck within our prison. This unique in combination with the aspect is what makes this build strong and brought the build from a kind of alright build to being one of the best in the game. And when it comes to the gameplay, it's actually silky smooth. All you really do is you drop down a boner prison and spam out spears, and repeat once the enemies are dead. You'll also have some additional utility in the form of corpse tendrils to pull in enemies, and the rest of the skills are simply there to boost your damage. A fun yet incredibly strong build that I can 100% recommend. Alright, time for the next class, the Cringeborn. This was the most broken class of all time during Season 6. In Season 7, it was absolute dog shit, and now it's somewhere in between. All the new uniques and aspects introduced this season were absolute trash as well, but what made the class somewhat decent is the new boss power, Ashava's Breath. There are also other boss powers that are usable when it comes to this build, but they all have one thing in common, and that is being able to poison enemies. The reason this is strong is due to the humongous scaling it has when combined with the Cringeborn passives, and the reason it's only really used on the Cringeborn is due to them having access to the Noxious Resonance Key passive. This, in turn, allows for infinite damage scaling via critical strike damage. So basically, we use Ashava's Breath to poison enemies, scale the damage via Noxious Resonance, and enjoy some huge poison explosions. It's easily dealing damage in the billions, but compared to some of the other classes, it's perhaps not as impressive. Next on the list, we have one of my personal favorites, the Evade build. There are many ways to play this build, probably more ways than I count. So at least more than 2, because you can either use this build to poison enemies or scale your feather damage. Previously, we used toxin skins to poison enemies, but that's redundant now that we have the boss powers to do this instead, seeing as it's both easier to pull off and they deal more damage. You then scale your damage exactly the same way as you would do with the previous build. You stack a shit ton of crit and utilize Noxious Resonance. This build does, however, require a fair bit of cooldown reduction to pull off. This is because we want to evade constantly, and evade, unfortunately, has a cooldown. There are, however, several ways to do this, where the easiest is simply to grab the Sepazontech weapon, as it allows you to always use your third attack. Combine that with Thunder Spike, which can be casted while evading, and you instantly reduce the cooldown down to 0. This is, however, a massive damage loss, but it gets the build online early. The better way is to just stack a shit ton of cooldown reduction. This build is one of the fastest in the game for sure, but when it comes to the damage, it's not insane. But it will definitely get you farming Torment 4. And finally, for the final class of the day, we have the Wood Chopping Man. This class is so unbelievably fucking strong that it's already dealing trillions of damage 2 days into the season, and the best build is of course Cataclysm. I do, however, have some bad news. It requires snapshotting, and a bunch of them. And on top of that, you'll have to do it every time you cast Cataclysm. But on the flip side, the gearing requirements are lower than previous season. And the reason we need to snapshot is, well, it's how we scale our damage. We need to snapshot all our damage multipliers and overpowering, or else the damage of Cataclysm is simply a fart in the wind. To get the build online, I recommend reading through the entirety of the Boilerman's Guide because it's too much to cover here. Next up on the list is my favorite Druid build, Boulder Baby, and it's also a top 3 contender for the Wood Chopping Man. This build utilizes the Dolmen Stone to make your boulders spin around you, and in turn also granting them a shit ton of damage on top of that. You then want to combine this with the metamorphic stone aspect, which turns your boulder into a core skill, and in turn makes it spammable. When this is done, all you need to do is get enough spirit regeneration as to not run out when you're bashing your keyboard, and you've got yourself a build. This, along with the Cataclysm build, does require some reading as to not miss some important interactions, because that's how the Druid class is, a buttload of different interactions. But when you've understood everything and got the build online, then holy shit, is it rewarding and fun to play. And with that, we're done for this one. Don't forget to sign up for the giveaway, drop a sub, and I'll see you in the next one, my friends.